wasn't going to tell this story for this series, but my daughter said she feels like it's the creepiest one of all my stories, so she said I had to tell it. And it just so happens that it segues very nicely into the story up to this point. So I'll tell this story. I spent a lot of time at my cousin's house when I was younger. And right about the 5th or 6th grade, 6th, 7th, somewhere around in there, I went over to my cousin's house, and my little cousin, which was probably 3 or 4 at the time, he was really excited when I came in, and he was talking about catching the little man. And I bought into his story on some imaginary thing he came up with. So I started helping him devise traps and everything to catch this little man. Well, my aunt asked me if I knew what he was talking about. And I don't know, some imaginary little man running around that he came up with. She said, no, let me tell you the story. I said, okay. So she and my uncle had this other house, and it was a tiny little house. It only had 2 bedrooms. And there was my aunt and uncle at the time, my cousin Ross, and KC, which is the middle cousin in that family. KC's bedroom was the closet in my aunt and uncle's room. And she said at this time she was maybe 2 or 3, and she would tell my aunt that there was a little man that would come into the closet and keep her company at nighttime. And just like most adults and older people would think, it's something she just came up with. It's imaginary. Well, they ended up moving out of that house and moving into a newer house. And my uncle from that side of the family, my aunt's brother, moved into that house. And it was him and my 2 cousins from that side. One of my cousins was out from school sick one day, so he stayed home with him. And they were laying in bed. And my uncle said he woke up and saw a little man standing on the edge of his bed. Well, he stared at him for a minute, and he really didn't know what he was seeing, so he leaned up to get a better look, and this little man jumped off the bed and ran over to the closet. Well, my uncle got up and checked the closet, and there was nothing in there. So he thought himself that he was crazy. And he told my aunt about it. And my aunt put it together and said, KC actually used to talk about a little man in that house that would come into that closet. So that's pretty wild. So here we've got my aunt and uncle trying to figure out what's going on with this little man. They're not telling anybody about it. It's just something kind of crazy. Well, the uncle that lived in that house passed away from cancer. And so my aunt moved all of his stuff over to their house. And there was one morning, my uncle had gone to work, all the kids were at school, and she was at home laying in bed. And she opened her eyes and she saw the little man standing at the doorway with his hand around the door frame, and he was just staring at her. Well, she didn't want to move. She said it didn't creep her out or anything. There was There was no bad vibe about it. She just knew he was standing there and was staring at him. Well, she decided she was going to move the covers back and move toward him. And she started moving the covers. Well, he took off through the house. So she took off through the house after him. And they ran all the way to the other end of the house where my cousin Ross's room was. And he ran into that room and ran into the closet and disappeared. And after she had told me the whole story, I asked her, I said, why didn't you talk to him? Why didn't you ask him what he was? And she said, honestly, I didn't even think about it. I just saw him and I wanted to get closer to see what he was. I didn't know what to do with this information. I was 14, maybe 15 at the time. I went on about my life. I mean, I'd seen crazy things too, but I'd never seen a little man. So, not very long after that, I know at this point I was 15, and my cousin Ross came over to my house, and it was late at night. We're laying there just talking, and we started getting a little bit more sleepy, so conversation was starting to get a little bit further apart. Things were getting quieter, and my room was super dark, but there was a security light outside, and the light shined through the window, not into the room, but the window was illuminated. I saw something move over by my drums, and I thought, there's no way, because it was small. So I nudged Ross. I said, hey, there's something over by my drums, right over by your guitar amp. So he started looking, and he said, I think that's the little man. And so we're looking really hard, trying to see him. He was moving really slow. And we finally caught enough of a silhouette of him with the illumination of the window that we could tell it was the little man. And I had no idea what to expect because I wasn't really given a great description of him. But this thing seemed to be about a little less than 2 foot tall and perfectly proportionate, like a tiny human figure standing there. Well, he moved toward my closet and went into my closet, and due to the trend of the stories, he's going to disappear into the closet. So there was really no need to get up and chase him. We didn't ask him any questions, and just like my aunt said, we didn't even think about it. We just wanted to see what was up with him. So moving forward in life several years, and actually up to the specific point that we're at in the story, the other story, I was living in Arkansas, and in my apartment I had these stands that I built for my surround sound speakers, and the left one was right beside the hallway, and I'm real weird about having things lined up. So where the hallway came out, the edge of that speaker stand was lined up perfectly with it. On the corner of the base of that thing, I noticed one day the dust was kind of swiped on it. And I took note of it, but I really didn't think much into it because, I mean, easily I could have swiped something across that. I was standing at that corner one day, and I was putting my boots on, getting ready to go to work, and I was looking down, leaning over, and I slid my right foot into my boot. And it got about halfway into the boot, and I was wearing a hat, so the bill of my hat was hanging down. And while I was looking down, right up under my bill, I saw 2 feet run up and stop directly in front of me. And all I could see was like from the knees down because of the bill of my hat. And I've started to very slowly lift my head up to look at him. And I lost my balance. My foot slipped into my boot, and therefore I like stepped forward toward him. And he took off, run into the bedroom, and went into the closet and disappeared. I have no idea what in the world this thing is, but he followed me all the way to Arkansas. Now, I could be a different one, could be many of them, but apparently within my family, there's proportionate 2-foot tall men that run around and just hang out with our family, but there's no energy connected to it. There's no vibes that it gives off. There's no negativity. There's no positivity. He's just there. And since that day, I've not seen him again. And that was 15, 16 years ago. I haven't seen him again. But that transitions into the actual story that this chapter was meant to be, which is another chapter of the sawmill. I had talked the sawmill up to everybody and told them about all the things that had happened out there. And I had this friend named Jake that I worked with at Home Depot, and he was all excited about my stories and stuff. He loved to hear them. Well, things got weird in Texas with my family, and I ended up getting custody of my sister, Vanna, and I was taking vacation to go down and pick her up to bring back with me. Well, Jake ended up, through a crazy string of events, he ended up getting fired from Home Depot. And we still really don't understand why it happened the way it did, but it happened exactly as I was walking out of work, and he was walking out of work with me, telling me that he had just got fired. And I told him that I was headed down to Texas to pick up my sister and ask him if he wanted to go with me. And he said, yeah. So we got in the car, we went and picked up his stuff, we headed down to Texas. And we got down there, picked up my sister, and we had a couple days that we were going to spend down there. And there was one night we were wondering what we were going to do. So the sawmill got brought up. And like I said, I had talked it up. Vanna knew stories about it. Jake knew stories about it. My wife at that time had heard all the stories. She had never been. They had never been. They wanted to go. So we went to the sawmill. It was us 4. And we got out there. We were walking around. I was showing them around. And absolutely nothing was going on. It was an extremely comfortable feeling out there. And I'd been out there before when nothing was going on, but there was still a feeling, and the atmosphere was crazy. But this night, nothing. No feelings whatsoever. We were just basically walking around this place at nighttime, just like it would be in the daytime, with nothing. So we we had made our way out to the 50 headstones. We turned around, we were walking back, and I had even made the comment. I said, sorry guys, I talked this place up, got you all excited about it, and nothing's gonna happen. We were walking back, we got to the Tomb Raider building, we got right here at this corner, and Jake decided to split off, and he started walking this direction out toward the front of the whole place, between the front and the pond over there. And the rest of us just kept going. I heard, we got to about right here, and I heard a noise, and I still, with all the things I've learned, all the things I've done and seen and heard, I still have no idea how this happened. But I heard a noise that I just understood. I knew exactly what it was. And it was the sound of knees bending. And it sounds weird, but I heard these knees bend. And I knew exactly where it was. It was right over here on the other side of the pond, and this is a giant pond. I heard those knees bend, and I somehow knew what was coming. And then I heard the next noise, and I knew exactly what that was. That sound was the sound of a jump, and it's almost, you have to describe it like in a cartoon when somebody jumps. There's a whoosh that happens, and that's what I heard. And I knew that one of these wolf-looking things was out there. He was on the other side of that pond, and he just jumped over that pond. I knew that's what had happened. And when I heard that jump, I braced. I hunkered down and was expecting it to land somewhere near me. There was a gigantic crash. There was a thud of a body hitting a tree. And then an extremely loud crash. This thing had jumped the pond, hit a tree, was gonna land in the tree apparently, and knocked the tree down. And this tree crashed to the ground. A screech owl screeched and took off in the other direction. And here comes Jake, running back around behind the building, screaming. It was coming through the bushes at me. And everybody's yelling, asking me what's going on, what are we gonna do? Just everybody's panicked. And in my brain, I'm going through all the routes that I know of this place, trying to figure out how to get back to the car without going in front of those buildings, going through all these trails that lead out the backside because I didn't want to be in front of those buildings. I had mentioned in chapter 2 that there were 2 times in my life that I mentally prepared myself to not see the next day. This was the second. When all that went down, it sounds brutal, but I really expected us to be killed that night. I'm going through the layout of this place in my brain. Everybody's panicked and yelling, and I yelled back. I said, everybody shut up and let me think. I'm gonna get us out of here. So I finally chose a path, and I said, there's no point in running. I know these things can run as fast as a car can drive, so just calmly walk. Calm your energy, and let's just walk out of here. So we went a back path. We got back out to the main path further up in the woods, and started walking toward the car. There was about 20 yards in front of us. There was the sound of a dog whimpering, as if to say, "Help me, I'm dying, please help me." And I knew what it was doing. It was a ploy, just trying to get our attention. And all of them asked, what do we do? I said, we keep walking. And this is in the fall time. There are dead leaves everywhere. We're in the middle of the national forest. There's leaves everywhere. We move about 5 yards, and this thing has moved to almost right in front of us. We moved 5, it moved 10. And we never heard a sound. We never heard it move through the leaves. It was right off in the bushes where we really should have been able to see it. And it was making this noise, the whimper, trying to get us to come out in there and help it. And I knew, I said, this is the moment. I've got to stand up. So I handed the flashlight to Vanna, and I balled up my fist, ready to fight for our lives. And I said, Jake, and Jake already knew what I was going to say. He said, yep. I said, you got my back? He said, yep. Because Jake is a big old dude. I knew, I mean, if something went down, we might not win, but at least I had Jake with me. But I said, you got my back? He said, yep. And I stepped into the bushes. I was going to go head to head with it. And as soon as I stepped in the bushes, it stopped and started making the sound maybe like 100 yards behind us. So it moved, or there were multiples, not sure, but there was nothing in the bushes when I stepped in to go head to head with it. Started making the sound way behind us, and I said, this is our chance. This is our chance to see tomorrow.